I was wondering where to introduce this panelist. And I said, God, please give me the order. And he certainly has. Married with 2 daughters. Please note, 2 daughters. Has interests in youth development, development issues, governance, trade rules, poverty, media, that is radio and television, healing and reconciliation. And he has a lot more, you know. He's an amazing guy. Educational background, Trinity College, Dublin, University of Dublin, 2010. He's attended the University of the West Indies, got a BA in theology, ministerial studies.
Good evening to you, my sisters and brothers. I think 9 of us are here, 10. I want to, first of all, say thanks for this wonderful opportunity to share some thought, just some thoughts, and also to say thanks to the committee, the Public Service Union and its organizing committee, and of course the National Council of Women for allowing us this privilege to share some thoughts and perhaps disturb you a little bit. I also appreciate your presence and the presence of our internet audiences and internet and radio audiences. But I want to confess, though, that the motivation for coming and for accepting the invitation is twofold. One, I am, like all parents in this country, very disturbed by not just the levels, but the nature of intimate partner violence in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we could probably have a discussion later by what we mean by that. I think that covers quite a bit of sexual offenses, or offenses perpetrated on our women and girls. But I'm even more disturbed by the fact that our society, in spite of good legislation from the last, and Zita has said it, from 1979 thereabout, as recent as 2015, when we passed the new Domestic Violence Act of 2015. In spite of all that, the levels of violence and sexual violence perpetrated against our young girls, the 324 is only reported, and the 297 is just reported. We have to cast our minds on the macro society. That's just a microcosm of what we believe exists. So I'm disturbed by that. The levels and the nature of the crimes perpetrated on our girls under 13 and under 15. And I'm also disturbed by the fact that we tolerate it. We are indifferent. We are very slow to act. We keep silence, dignified silence, if you may. And we normalize the violence perpetrated on our children, our girls, and our boys, to an extent, in other forms. And so this therefore brings me to what I call our hands are not clean. our hands are not clean. And I use this deliberately and provocatively to use a biblical concept, to borrow it from the Hebrew Scriptures, as a metaphor to suggest that all of us, including the institutions that we hold dear to, the church, the family, and the school, those spaces of morality and security, and I use security in this space, in this presentation, to mean well-being and a sense of a sort of a harmony in our society that those institutions provided. And so, I want to extend that analogy as well to, or the metaphor, to the fact that it includes our relationships. Both man and woman, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, parent, child, etc. Boss and employee. It extends to what I call the playboy politician and the freaky pastors. I want to say that our hands are not clean. And we have a tendency to talk about violence as something that is over there, something that happens to them girl over there, or something that happens to them people over there. But really and truly, I learned violence not from the Bruce Lee movies and Jet Li movies I watched in the 80s and the 90s. I saw it in the home. And I've seen it in the church. I've seen it certainly at school. So I say our hands are not clean. But I also use it to suggest also that when men use their hands, when men use their minds, when men use their penises, their body, to violate our girls and our women, their hands, our hands, are not clean. When institutions use their privilege, their money, their power, their privilege and structures and processes and procedures, their hands are not clean. Our hands are not clean. And so, without spending too long, the question you might be asking is, how do we clean our hands? And I want to suggest that we could wash our hands, but washing our hands may just touch the surface of the problem we have. And so, and it may be temporal or just for a while. So the problem may reoccur, as is happening in our society. And so I want to suggest further that a simple cleaning or washing of the hands, our institutional hands and our physical hands and bodies as men and women, is not enough. So if we are serious about what I call fundamental change, the kind of change that is necessary to begin to disrupt, and I say disrupt, the current patterns and manifestations of violence in all its forms, then we have to change attitudes and structures and systems, and we have to make them work. How do you explain almost 40 years of what I will say reasonably good legislation, but yet in some quarters the numbers are increasing? Certainly what the lawyers like to call statutory rape, sex with girls, children under 13. How do we explain that in a society that has had good legislation for the last 40 years? I want to also suggest that we have to revisit some of our religious teachings that relegate, demean, and view women as some kind of thing, some kind of inferior being, and what some people like to call nothingness. Churches must therefore stop encouraging women to go kiss and make up. When it is clear, when they return to the relationship or in the relationship, is more violence. How does a Christian, and I'm saying Christian mindfully because we are a multi-religious community, believe it or not, this business that we are a Christian nation, we need to kind of throw that out of our minds. But because we are predominantly Christian, I'm saying, how does a pastor, a priest, a bishop, a minister, a deacon could watch a young woman in the eye and send her back to a violent relationship? I don't understand that at all. Our police officers and institutions of national security, particularly our police, must take instances and reports of abuse seriously at the first instance of it being reported. In fact, they must carry out the law because they, as you were told, the 2015 Domestic Violence Act now places an obligation on a police officer in this country to take a report. They can't send you back to tell you, well, that's a domestic thing, go family court. No, the law places and confers an obligation, a duty on a police officer. And the Child or Children Care and Protection Act also gives some obligation to teachers, people in the social services, and so on, those obligations. I'm getting a little passionate here. But the last one, I want to say that mothers and grandmothers must also stop taking hush money. And it is not a simple thing, because you will be amazed at who is involved. You will be amazed at who is calling pastor so-and-so to mediate and to take it quietly. Talk to some of our counselors, not the legal ones, but the health, our professional counselors. Talk to some of them. Talk to some pastors, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. The thing is real connected. And so, no amount of fancy talk here, no amount of prayers, unless we ourselves step up and speak out and do something about it, then we are creating a very dangerous society in the next 10 to 20 years that we wouldn't recognize. And then the final question, can we stop violence? Maybe, maybe not. But I believe we can say no to violence. as a society. And I have committed and I recommit myself here to work with others in this country and institutions in our society to disrupt the pattern or the patterns. We need to disrupt it because otherwise the kind of psychosocial damage that we're doing to our society, we won't recognize it in the next 10, 20 years, if so far. Our female population will be not depleted, but damaged. And I speak passionately, and even before I had two lovely daughters, I started speaking about this thing, but then the reality hit me 11 years ago. So I'm saying to us that we have an opportunity to engage our leaders, our church leaders, our pastors, our bishops, our priests, our ministers, our deacons. We probably have an opportunity now because election is not too far away, and we must demand that we put it on the national agenda. How are we going to do that? All of us are part of, many of us rather, are part of constituency councils. We are part of the highest institution of our land. We are public servants. Can we imagine in our constituency councils putting on the agenda the matter of violence in all its forms, and particularly the violence meted out to our girls and our boys and our women? Because the statistics are showing, yes, that men are victims, but the statistics are showing a far different picture when it comes to girls and boys. And so, girls and women, sorry. And so we have to be concerned about that. I want to end by saying the solution cannot be palliative. It has to be curative. We can't put a plaster on it. We have to hit it. And if not stop it, minimize it. And I like to use the word disrupt. Let's try to disrupt. And one of the ways we could deal with that and do that is by looking at our education system. My friend Anicia Batiste, a few years ago, raised the issue of rights-based society. I think it's something like that we need to begin to think about from kindergarten right up. We have it, but it's just ad hoc. It is just some obscure something there. We have to make it as part of the system from kindergarten right up to community college and beyond. That's the only way I see we could do the kind of work and begin to get the change in the next 20 years with a new generation of leaders and boys and girls who we call Vincentians and persons who make this place their home. I want to stay here and then I'll take your questions later.